Sam Darnold to the Seahawks, something that I personally didn't see coming. Obviously, we talked about it a lot on the last episode. Where was he going to go? We had our different destinations. He ends up going to the Seahawks. Personally, I think we both thought it was a bad move based off the information that we had with DK Metcalf leaving, obviously Tyler Lockett getting cut, just everything kind of seeming like Geno Smith obviously getting traded. That's the reason why this move happens. But I personally give the Darnold to the Seahawks a C-. C- for me, just because of the fact that you lose a couple of those pieces. You don't have your second best receiver, or maybe tied first best receiver from last year. The Seahawks just weren't going anywhere last year. I don't think this moves the needle. I don't know that Sam Darnold is a significantly better version of I think he might be like a slightly better version of Geno Smith, not significantly better. Last year in the Vikings, he had so many different receivers, he had a good offensive line, had a good running back beside him. There were so many different factors that played into Sam Darnold being good last year. You look back just a couple of years ago when he was on the Jets and even on the Panthers, it was just those years were absolutely terrible for him. So I don't know that Sam Darnold isn't just a product of the surrounding pieces around him in Minnesota, and obviously a good head coach. So a C- for me. I don't think that he'll be worse in that offense than Geno was, but that team is just a little bit worse than it was last year. And I also think that they had the opportunity to maybe have a really down year and then get someone in the draft next year. And Sam Darnold will be good enough where that is probably not going to be the case. So if you look long-term, I think this is like a C- at best.
So I actually gave it a D. I went a step lower, and the reason is I think you're not trading, but you're swapping out a guy in Geno Smith who was a floor raiser for you for the Seahawks. I actually disagree. I think Geno Smith is definitely a better quarterback than Sam Darnold, and I don't even really think it's all that close. I would say that Geno Smith was able to elevate that offensive line. He got sacked a ton, but they weren't really on him. That offensive line was putrid, and the defense for Seattle wasn't exactly anything to say that they were one of the best or one of like top 10 in the league. He was the guy who was able to carry them. Now he had the weapons, had the running game, but you trade Geno Smith, bring in Sam Darnold. I don't even know if he's going to be able to do the same exact job that Geno Smith would have been able to do with his weapons. And you also trade DK Metcalf. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me why they brought him in. We were obviously talking about where these guys would go on the last podcast, and it was just a shocker that this team actually ended up paying that amount of money to Sam Darnold to kind of invest in him. Whether that is long-term or not, I don't think it will be. I can't give this move I can't give it a passing grade. I can't give it any higher than a D.
Yeah, and you look at towards the end of that season, it just got significantly worse. Obviously, look through the first 16, 17 weeks of the season, and he was playing amazing. But then you go against the playoff teams, Detroit, obviously they get beaten 31-9. He has a sub 50% completion percentage. He was 18 for 41 in that game, even with the weapons around him. Then you go into the playoffs, you're like, maybe that's a one-off game. You play the Rams, get beaten up by them 27-9. They had no chance in that game. From start to finish, it looked like they had no answer for the Rams. And then he goes 25 for 40, and the stats probably look better than he actually played in that game. So the Vikings maybe said that they need to move off of him. They didn't like what they saw from the last couple of games, and for good reason. I mean, if you look at the history of Sam Darnold, I don't think anybody was expecting him to have as good of a year as he did. I mean, good for him that he got paid, but I think it was an overpay, and they had an opportunity to maybe just reset the franchise and just another. I think this will be another gap year or maybe years, and just something that the franchise doesn't really need at this point.
Isn't that just the worst spot for Sam Darnold in his career to be paid $36 million? Shout out to that man, got the bag. But like outside of that, I just hate this. It's just a worse situation than what Geno Smith just dealt with. And Geno Smith like really did not have a bad year last year. He threw a ton of picks, and I'll give you that. But Geno Smith was not a bad quarterback. He gets a bad rap. He's now with the Raiders. What is Sam Darnold going to be thinking after a year from now when it feels like this team is going to draft a quarterback and they didn't help him with the personnel wise to try to like make this season so much better for the Seahawks? He goes from the Vikings where it was like a perfect situation, weapons everywhere. It feels like that team was in win now mode, and the Seahawks just aren't there right now.
And it feels like every other team that we listed probably would have been a better spot for him. Maybe the Steelers, the Giants, like anywhere else almost. Obviously the Titans were thrown into the rumor mill for a little bit there. I don't know if that's significantly better than Seattle is or any better at all. But like the main destinations that he could have went to, I feel like this was one of the poorer ones. And we kind of had like almost visceral reactions when it was even listed on when you read off that Diana Rossini tweet last time, where it was like, there's just no reason.
We were just trying to wrap our heads around it.
And
Didn't
there was,
make any sense.
just no rationale behind it. So, I mean, good luck to the Seahawks, but I mean, like where would the like when you're looking into making this move, where is the ceiling for this team now? Do you think Sam Darnold makes you a playoff contender?
See,
Like,
that's what I mean. Like $36 million for a bridge quarterback. I think they don't make the playoffs next season. I think, unfortunately, I don't buy into Sam Darnold without a ton of weapons, without a team like the 49ers or something like that around him where he can lean on the running game, the passing game, or the receivers, I should say, in the passing game, and the defense. I don't know if I see any more than 6 or 7 wins. And then if you're Seattle, is that more than you wanted this year? Probably.
significantly more than
Yeah.
if not like if you want to be in the root like the just the top of the draft is what I'd call
Yeah,
it.
exactly. All right, let's move to Daniel Jones to the Colts.
Daniel Jones to the Colts. I give this grade. My personal grade for Daniel Jones to the Colts is a C. I think this is like right in the middle ground where Daniel Jones had a good year on the Giants. He has shown flashes of being a decent quarterback. He has the dual threat quarterback. He has good legs about him. He can kind of get out of the pocket. The Colts offensive line isn't bad, but it's also not the best offensive line in the league. He can work around that a little bit. And he also, like you were saying, it's not a guaranteed starting position, but it kind of lights the fire under Anthony Richardson. Maybe not all that much. Maybe not if you like you were mentioning Aaron Rodgers, I think last time, that probably gives him a little bit more of a fire lit under him. Daniel Jones is like kind of a quarterback where you could see being a backup pretty easily on that team. But I mean, they had to bring someone in for the perspective of making Anthony Richardson like at least like try a little bit harder if that's the correct word you want to use there. I think it's a C, like not the worst one, not the best one. I don't think that he's the day one starter. I think Anthony Richardson like pulls out that quarterback battle. So I think he's a fine backup.
Yeah, I think Daniel Jones is not the day one starter, or if he is, I don't think he makes it past like week 2. If I'm just being completely honest, I give this grade a B only because of that. The fact that I just think he's a backup quarterback. I don't really know if there was a quarterback out there on the free agent market that would have really lit a fire under Anthony Richardson outside of a guy like Aaron Rodgers, where it's like, oh, Aaron Rodgers coming in, and for the next 1 to 2 years, he is going to be the starter. And Anthony Richardson can't do anything about it pretty much no matter what. That, in my opinion, was the way to light a fire under him. And I just don't know if there was anybody else out there that would have done that. I mean, maybe like a Russell Wilson.
Okay,
But
that's like literally the only like that's what I was going to interject with.
yeah.
The only other name that I can kind of think of that would be like that nobody's really talking about. I feel like Russell Wilson's job is like kind of up in the air, and nobody's. I feel like he might go to one of the teams that like need one that like just are looking for like maybe a bit of a bridge quarterback. But that's really what I was going to mention. Like Russell Wilson is probably the only other guy besides Aaron Rodgers that's
So,
probably.
yeah. So without those guys in play, then I think you're looking for a guy who can come into camp. And with that veteran experience, maybe you can make it a show where it's potentially up between those two guys, and then it doesn't actually affect Anthony Richardson too much in the long run. I think maybe they were just looking for a guy in training camp. So I'm okay with it. It's a decent backup. I'll give it a B. All right, Justin Fields to the New York Jets. Justin Fields got a lot of people who love him, but he's going to the New York Jets now.
I'm not one of those people that love him. I think that Justin Fields to the Jets is a D. I don't like this move at all. I think that Justin Fields is good enough where he can win a couple of those games where you kind of grind out a couple wins, especially with like he has decent talent around him. I like the running backs in that group. The receivers aren't terrible. That obviously you have good receivers on that team. You lose Devontae Adams, but you have guys on that team. But I think that the supporting cast is good enough where he's going to win them a couple games. Are they going to make the playoffs? I'm going to say it right now. The Jets will not make the playoffs this year. Then why do you make this move? The Jets are bad, could be bad enough with a bridge quarterback, like somebody like Jameis Winston or just one of those like should be backup quarterbacks that start for a team for a year. They needed a bridge quarterback this year. For some reason, it's the Jets. They like being in mediocrity or like towards the edge of like bad mediocrity. And I think this is just another one of those moves. I don't think Justin Fields moves the needle for them at all. And I think that I don't think he's a terrible quarterback, but he's probably going to be a career backup for his time after the Jets. And I just don't see this moving the needle for them at all. It moves the needle for them in the wrong direction because they should be trying to get a quarterback in the next draft. And I don't know that they're going to be able to if Justin Fields wins them more games than they should.
Well, there's a lot that goes on, I guess, throughout a season that could put a team down there at the first, second, or third pick in the draft. So I'm not going to rule it out just yet. I also don't know how much of a raiser Justin Fields is in general. Like, I don't know if he can elevate this team. I think this team gets credit for moving on from Aaron Rodgers. So I'll give them that. And then having a different quarterback come in, I think it's good for the locker room. But yeah, I'll give this a C because I do actually think that Justin Fields can be your bridge quarterback. So I don't really have too much of a problem with that. I don't think it really eliminates them from not being in contention for the number 1 overall pick. Just to be frank, I think 2 years, $40 million is probably too much, but I'll give it a C.
Yeah, I also just like speaking on last year, like the Steelers, like obviously showed that they weren't as good of a team as they started off as when they started like super hot. But they, I mean, Justin Fields went 4-0 in that team, and everybody was like complaining that, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people were complaining that Russell Wilson was coming in and stepping in for him. But Russell Wilson is a significantly better thrower of the football. Obviously, Justin Fields is more of a dual threat guy just in general. But I don't know. I think Justin Fields can win them enough games where they're not in the contention for one of those better places or better draft positions, and I don't know that that's what they want. So I mean, if he loses them enough games, then this is a C. If he doesn't, then this is just a terrible move by the Jets.
Geno Smith, biggest trade I'd say so far in the NFL free agency window. He goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. What do you grade that move? I can't believe I just said Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a minute. But hey, Las Vegas Raiders, I give it a C+. I give Geno Smith to the Raiders a C+. It's one of those moves where he gets reunited with Pete Carroll. I think that the resurgence of his career started with Pete Carroll. So I don't mind that. I think that he can have a good season. I like you're saying you like him more than Sam Darnold. So he's a good enough quarterback in a stacked AFC conference where it's like very top heavy and then everyone else kind of duking it out. I could see them maybe sneaking into like a playoff battle and being in the middle. But again, a lot of these moves it's just like teams that could be drafting really high next year and are just like seemingly trying to avoid it for no particular reason. I think that the Raiders had an opportunity to be really bad again next year and just go 2 years of being terrible and maybe get a guy like Arch Manning. Like that is like the path that the Raiders kind of built out for themselves. Maybe you get Pete Carroll and you want to win now mentality, but
I think that's exactly what it is. I think they
yeah,
just want to be competitive right now, and Geno Smith was available. A 3rd round pick, probably too much, but at the same time, Geno Smith did raise the floor for the Seahawks, and he could be a really good quarterback for the Raiders. I mean, maybe they make a playoff push, and maybe the draft starts to come together. I think the Raiders are thinking that their team with a good draft, adding Geno Smith, they can make some noise. I think that that's what they think. Not everybody can be in contention for the 1st overall pick, in March of 2025, to try to get the 2026 1st overall pick. So I'm kind of a fan. I'll give it a B. I realize I didn't say my grade. I give it a B. I think it's a good move. Maybe 3rd round pick is too much, but I think they want to be competitive.
Yeah, that's the reason I went C+, because I think that the Raiders are like good enough as a team overall to not have to be in the there's so many teams that are going to be bad, or maybe not so many, but there's a couple teams you kind of feel like are going to be really bad next year. I feel like the Raiders are a step above that and could be a step above that, especially with a quarterback like Geno Smith. I'm not seeing them pass at best 6th seed in the AFC. So I C+. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a bad move. I just don't. I don't think it's great either. I mean, none of these moves were supposed to be it wasn't supposed to be a huge quarterback free agent class. So Geno Smith wasn't even a free agent. He got traded. So
exactly. All right. Last one on the list, Zach Wilson to the Dolphins.
Zach Wilson to the Dolphins. My first good grade of all of them. Zach Wilson to the Dolphins. I give it a B. I think that Zach Wilson isn't the greatest quarterback in the world. I obviously you know that from his time as a Jet, and he didn't even get any playing time with the Broncos. But as somebody who's seen Tyler Huntley and whoever come in for Tua in his absence, Zach Wilson would be the best one of the quarterbacks. Skylar Thompson, we tried tinkering with a little bit, and people thought he was going to be the truth for some reason. Zach Wilson is significantly better than all of those guys, in my personal opinion. He wasn't a good starter for the Jets, but he wasn't the worst quarterback in the NFL. He wasn't what the Jets wanted, and he wasn't going to beat out Bo Nix. But with the weapons around him, if Tyreek Hill can stay happy, Jalen Waddle plays well, we have a good receiving core. Our offensive line is very much middle of the pack. It can be really good in some weeks, really bad in other weeks. We have Devon Achane in that backfield. The defense also has its ups and downs, but it was one of the top 10 defenses, maybe in the lower half of the top 10 defenses in the NFL last year. I think that this move is really good because Tua has too many injury concerns, and I don't know that you can like consistently rely on him to be healthy. So getting a guy like Zach Wilson, who was a former starter, can now kind of integrate into that backup role. I give it a B.
Yeah, I'll give it a B as well. I think he could be a quality insurance policy. He did not dress, I think, for a single game last year with the Broncos, but hopefully he learned something under Sean Payton and in that quarterback room, and he can apply it to the Dolphins and his time with the Dolphins if Tua goes down with another injury. I think that could be a good safety net for this team, and they don't end up throwing away a season just because Tua's out for 4 or 5 games. Maybe Zach Wilson isn't the answer, but he's a true backup quarterback at this point in his career. And if he can elevate his game when called upon for 2 to 3 games at a time, I think that's a win, and that's a really good addition to this team.